All right. You guys hear me? Good. Ready to start? Okay, let's see. Let me just start by sharing my screen again. Share computer sound. Okay, I think that's it. I'm so tired of looking at to the same model over and over again. No, so my plan today is actually for us to, let me just see who is in the room here for now. You. Okay. Let's see, we have 5 people. José Pericles, Sven, Ricardo, and Camilo. Okay, cool. So we are 9:30, so let's start this. So my plan for today is to actually go over some renders, and I think that's always like something cool to look at. You know, it's like if you don't have a lot of experience with rendering Arnold and Maya, that's a good little chance to just like learn a few things. Probably not gonna get too fancy with the lighting. I'm gonna do like some simple lighting setup. But I'm gonna talk about HDRIs as well and where to find them. And sometimes it's you know, it's like it's this quest to find the right HDRIs. And when I test my models, I try to test like with multiple different light sources just to make sure that the skin shader is actually working under different lighting conditions. So we're gonna go through that. But before, I'm gonna start like doing some more sculpting on this guy because I kind of lost a little bit of the likeness since yesterday. I think the proportion of the head got a little bit taller and it's better. But overall, like some features, like especially the mouth and teeth, kind of got a little bit lost in there. Yeah, it's always hard to work at night, you know, like especially at the very end of the night when you're completely fried, and then things just go wrong. So now that I have a little bit of energy, let's try to fix a few things. And then, but without spending way too much time. So probably like, let's say like half an hour to something like that, half an hour, maybe like 40 minutes working on it. And then I'm gonna switch to Maya and then start doing some renders. So let's do this. Just minimize this. And I'm gonna pull a reference on the side here, which is the same one I was using before. It's gonna be this guy here. I'm using that reference, but this time I'm gonna put like very big on the screen because sometimes it's hard to work with you know, with the small one. I like to work with the small one just for proportions, but then when I need something a little bit more precise, I'd rather go like with the biggest resolution I can find. In this case here, let me see, which one is that? I had it before. Not this one, this one. So this one here, you have the watermark and everything, but at least has a nice resolution that I found on the internet. And with that, I can actually try to, you know, to tweak a couple of things, especially eyes and mouth. He has this interesting look that is almost like his eyes are drooping to the sides, right? And then and they're kind of small probably because of the refraction here of the glasses. You never know. You see like there's a distortion going on here. So sometimes you know, it's like you see the eyes smaller than they actually are. Which adds to the weirdness, right? But like I said, we are at this point just working in averages. Everything is symmetrical, so we're just like gonna try to compensate by eye for now, and then at the end we're gonna try to match things a little better. So I'm gonna move to the other screen here so I can have it pretty big, and I'm gonna keep working on it. So if you have your own models in there, I suggest you guys to keep working on your models, and eventually, like if I say something that it's interesting, you can switch back. My computer reset it overnight, so I think we have like a blackout, and that sucks because it's rainy today. It's not you know, it wasn't raining for like 2 weeks, and now it's raining again. And I hope we don't have a blackout, but if we do, of course, we're going to resume the whole thing later. But for now, let's just let's do my little tweaking here. And then let's start just like defining some forms here. Let's switch to my clay buildup to 2 as usual. And I'm gonna, you know, start pulling things around here and trying to get a little bit closer to the likeness. First thing, I'm gonna isolate that eyelid. And if you remember yesterday, what we did, we actually click like any of those buttons, the move brush, move button or scale or rotation. And then you can even turn off the gizmo, and then that way you can actually select very easily the eyelashes, the eyelids, if you have like an interesting topology in there. This one, if you remember yesterday, we did automatically with the ZRemesher, and it created a nice little topology in there. So actually at this point, I'm gonna do the eyelid. So I'm gonna just click the eyelid and I'm gonna pull it down until we kind of switch. Let's see if I can get the selection here. I did not. Let me reduce the resolution so it's faster. Let's try that. Yeah, so that way, let's see, that's too much. Let's go from this side here. Yeah, I think the topology is not helping me a lot. Let's see if I can do the opposite with this guy here. Yeah, anyway, I'm gonna paint by hand, I guess. So let's do that. This guy, I'm just gonna paint very quickly here. So I wanna make sure that this area is not gonna move for now. We have to make sure that, of course, that we get that little overlap in the corner because of the wrinkle in there. Oh, yeah. Sometimes I do this, like if you click Control and then you press any area inside of the any place inside of the area you already selected, is going to start smoothing it. It's kind of like by accident. And then, of course, you can undo with Ctrl+Z. But then, if you have Control and Alt pressed together, it actually sharpens it again. Right, so Control to smooth, and then to sharpen is just Ctrl+Alt. So I'm gonna just paint it back in there. A lot of stuff here is gonna be, of course, like if you know ZBrush, you're not gonna pay too much attention to this basic stuff I'm saying, but some people in the audience might, you know, have a little bit less experience with it. So let's start with that. As you remember, I'm working symmetrically at all times at this point. I'm just gonna pull that corner a little bit more. I'm gonna pull actually towards the front. And for that, I'm gonna pull both towards the front. And you can always use the move topological as well. So the move topological, this brush here, it basically like respects the topology. So if I'm moving the top eyelid, it respects the bottom and vice versa. But if it's a place that's too tight like that, sometimes it still cannot find just a topology in there. So he kind of like grabs a little bit of the top as well, but it seems like it's okay for now. Just get it there. I'm gonna pull this one back. And then I'm gonna isolate it. Oops. Area is always tricky, especially if you don't have an ideal topology that hopefully you're gonna get later with the other topology. So I'm gonna mask it again. I'm gonna pull this area just to overlap. So let's mask a little space in there. Mask the top as well. Unmask this. See if I can pull a little bit, just enough for me to do some work in there. Pull out. That should be enough, so I can a little bit here. That should be for now. So let me keep working on the shape. So the caruncula yesterday, we were talking about this, the little tear duct in there, that I normally use like a separate object. So what I have right now is just a placeholder. So it's kind of like a cavity in there where everything is going to be, basically it's going to be covered once I added the additional object I have. So I'm going to just load my HBrush here, HPolish brush. And I'm going to do a little, define a little bit that the face in there. Just so divide once. Just keep that face a little bit more squarish. See right there. Just to define the eyelid a little better. It's nice when you have it nice and flat. At the end, of course, we're going to start smoothing out. For older people, normally, like some of those guys I noticed, like they get like very thick eyelids. You know, it's like they get puffy. So sometimes I use a little bit of the Inflate brush just to get that roundness, and I always like use intensity very low at like 2 or 3. So I could just use a little bit of that just to get a little bit more puffy right there. And I'm going to start, let's see, do some more carving here. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to just define this first step in here, which is basically like this first fold that happens pretty close to the edge. So I'm going to define it. Just get a little bit of that. Let me just reduce the intensity of my smooth brush, 30 something. I'm going to do that. So I'm going to define this first step. Let's define it with a standard. Oops, too strong. Let's see, 9, 8. I'm going to do that. Just going to pull it. And then, of course, like you have to take into account that there is a facial expression happening. And then, obviously, a lot of this stuff is going to be like the squint is going to affect this area. But yeah, just to have a little bit. So this is the first little step in there. So that's the first form that we're going to add. Let me reduce my intensity for this smooth a little bit again. Right. Like that. And then I'm going to go back to the eye bag here. Just double check how you guys doing over there, because I have you minimized in there. Okay. So it seems like you're still there. Let me just bring this guy to the side so you can see both you and the reference. And then let's go back here. Okay, so you see like it's very flat underneath here, so I'm gonna have to start adding some volume. First, I'm gonna reduce the volume right here in this area, make it a little bit less volumetric, and then I'm gonna build up in the bottom right here. It has to look organic, and normally the direction comes in diagonal, right? So it comes like in this direction. If I do very strong, you can see, and then bends back to the side. So I'm gonna start the diagonal in here. And that's happening, of course, because of the facial expression in there. And then there's a little bit of stretch that happens in here. And when you start building the wrinkles later on, if I had to sketch the wrinkles, remember like I was sketching the ones on the side the other day for you guys to see what direction they go. When it comes to the eyes in here, you remember that I said that they do this kind of, you know, they come this direction, right? Like that way. And when it comes to the side here, the tendency is to get those wrinkles coming this way. So you have like those little wrinkles that form that way, and then those ones form that way. Like as you age, you know, it's all kind of, you know, it's a structure that, you know, everything happens that way. So like in the eye bag, for example, if I'm building something from scratch and I don't have a reference, normally what I try to do is I try to break up this bigger form by adding a bigger wrinkle. Let's see, let's just subdivide one so it's not too bad. So I added like a wrinkle like that, for example, and that one, just to break up the form, and then I start like building the other ones, and then there's some crisscrossing that happens from there as well. So all this stuff we're gonna be going through as we explore it. But for now, let me just erase it, and let's go back to work so I can get more stuff done. Because I really don't want to spend like a ton of time with the just like modeling all the time, you know. I want to get more stuff done. Probably gonna do some work in the during the weekend as well, just to get my my model a little bit more advanced. But like I said before, I mean, like none of the techniques I'm gonna be using they are not gonna be different from what I'm showing you guys already. It's just a matter of like spending time. So during that time, like in the weekend, I strongly encourage you guys to just do the same. You know, it's like keep working on your own models, and as much as possible, of course, applying whatever you're learning with the class, and because we want to make sure that you have something, you know, to start like doing some renders and things like that. So I'm gonna just like build some more volume here. I'm gonna remove the volume from this area. And this has to work from all angles, right? Like from time to time, it's good to just go from the top. For example, here I can tell that the eyelid, I can pull it a little bit out like that. Remember that the thickness has to be kind of constant, right? Like it's the same thickness all the way into the corners. And then when it comes to the corners in here, it normally gets a little bit thinner. But from the top, it's good if it has like a very, the arc is kind of perfect, you know, kind of goes around. Same for the top one. You see, like I already have a gap in there. I'm going to close that gap, and I'm going to bring a little bit closer to the eyeball. So yeah, keeping that form in check at all times. Same for this lower part here of the eyelid. If I can get like between this line between the eye and the eyelid, I can just like pull it up a little bit and just open that space a little bit more. So it's kind of like it's not like the face has to be kind of like flat, you know. So instead of like going down, it kind of goes up a little bit. It's almost like you have to take in account that there is a fold happening here. So basically like the skin is kind of folded in there. So I'm gonna just tuck it in a little bit like that carefully. And then you can just smooth it out a tiny bit. And then again, with HPolish, I'm gonna just define this plane here a little bit better. Just for reference, right? Like I said, at the end, we're gonna maybe use an inflate just to give this puffiness. Since he's an older guy. Like I said, it normally like gets a little puffier. So I'm gonna go right there, and then I'm gonna keep working on the rest. He has a very asymmetrical, based on the reference I'm seeing, it's very asymmetrical eyelid. So this one here on the right side of the screen, so his left eye, it's fairly in place. So like the eyelid looks like the right thickness, but then when you get to this side here, the left side of the screen, in the pictures I'm seeing, basically like this is way higher. So like this fold in here is way higher. So what I'm gonna do at this point, I'm gonna just like average the two of them. Because like I said, I'm gonna keep everything symmetrical all the way until I have the details in place. So then I can break the symmetry and I get a lot of stuff done much faster that way than doing you know, asymmetrical detail. That would suck. So let's pull that one. And then, as I said yesterday, for example, like this huge gap I have here, it shouldn't be there. So I'm going to start closing it up. So let's just isolate that area, the eyelid, like that. Maybe, let's see, resolution down a little bit so I can get it a little bit more like that. Okay, cool. And then go up again. And I'm going to invert it. And remember yesterday I mentioned that if you press Ctrl+A, you hide the mask. So with the hidden mask, it's much easier to see things. With the mask, sometimes it's pretty hard. So this whole area here that's very puffy now, I'm going to just deflate it. And I'm going to get this, this little folding here much smaller. I want to have it almost at the same level as the lid itself. Oh, actually, I'm using that's mask, so I cannot do it right now. So I'm gonna just keep working on this area here for now. So that starts to open up. So that's important, you know, it's like to get those folds correctly, because once you have the displacement, the displacement maps applied, and also the subsurface scattering, all this stuff here is gonna start being a little tricky, you know. If you don't have it correctly, then you're gonna start getting artifacts in your renders, and all kinds of stuff, strange stuff might happen. So let's get that. And then here, I'm gonna add some more volume in this area right here. Everything has a rhythm, right? Like the human body, it's everything is very rhythmic. And then when it comes to the face, it's the same, you know. It's like if you try to do a drawing, like a quick drawing of the main features of the face, you're going to start seeing things like flowing in a certain way. You know, it's like the way I'm moving my mouse here, you can see like there's a flow around it. And then if you can identify those, this flow and those kind of like almost like graphic design, you know, in the portrait, then you start like figuring out the forms a little bit faster. For example, like another thing that's interesting is that I keep a lot of stuff very organic, but then from time to time I introduce like a very sharp line, and you see those rhythms in every face as well. You know, it's like not everything is super smooth and not everything is super sharp. So keeping that balance is very important. So in the case of the corners of the nose in here, this is like, it never happens that you have like this sharp line in there. You know, it's like normally what happens is like it's a soft blend. Oh, I'm using still the mask, so I turn it off the mask. So you're gonna see like there's a soft blend in this area here. So I'm gonna blend it a little bit just to make it more organic. And then when the fold starts forming here, then you're gonna start seeing more of like a sharp line. But until that point, basically like it blends, you know, it's like more, the blend's more like a, in this area here. And also when it comes to wrinkles, if we are modeling, like the older the person is, talking about direction of wrinkles, like I said, for the eyes in there, when it comes to this area here, the wrinkles tend to do this, like they form that way. And they keep propagating, actually. They do this and they propagate this way. So of course, like depending on the type of face, you're gonna see some other ones coming that way, you know. And then because of the direction of the fibers of the muscle, they're a circle. They go like that, right? They're like circular around the mouth. The direction of the wrinkles, they're perpendicular to those lines. So basically like the direction of the wrinkles is gonna happen that way. And you're gonna go around, right? Basically that's the way it's going to be formed. Same for the eyes. If you have the eyes in here, like the direction is the fibers of the muscle are going this way, right? So we're going to have the wrinkles going obviously that way. So it gives you a hint of where they should go, right? Same that I was talking about here in the corners, you know, they kind of form that way. It's kind of like a little guide for you know, to if you have doubt about what direction the wrinkles should be going. Let's go back in here, the eyes. I think the most important part here that I missed from yesterday's session, that I kind of like lost in the likeness, I think was more like the mouth part. But obviously the eyes are very important, so you're just going to put a little bit of time in each one before we can do some test renders. I normally do those test renders very early on, because ZBrush, it doesn't use like an actual, you know, lighting setup, right? Of course, you can do some BPR in here and everything, but I trust an actual, you know, program like Maya to do the renders and have more like a physical light that I can control instead of using those fake HDRIs in ZBrush. And then and I can actually, you know, it's like evaluate the form better. And if I have a way to switch between like multiple HDRIs, even better. So I'm gonna fill up this area here a little bit more just to compensate for the squint. Yeah, and remember, like if you compare what I'm doing here with the skull, right? Like if you had a skull side by side, you start like noticing like all those forms, right? Like you're gonna have the zygomatic here. So we're gonna have like a line that goes like that. That line is basically like, you know, it's like you're gonna have the forms kind of like obeying to that form that's underneath. But in this case here, since I was talking about yesterday, you know, if you have like those forms compressed, then that means that the zygomatic here at this point is completely covered, right? Like so, this fat pad in here already moved up. So it's kind of like tricky to imagine the structure in there, but certain things kind of remain in place. You know, it's like you have some hints, for example, like from the corner here, right? Like of the brow ridge, you're gonna have like you have your orbital underneath, right? So if you try to imagine the orbital, if I start marking it again, then you're gonna get something like, let me get the other brush so you can see. So we're gonna start seeing something more like stronger, something more like that, right? So that's the orbital in there, and then when you get to this area here in the middle, then basically like that form, you're gonna start seeing a little bit of the bone. The remaining bone is still in the corner. So that's what I'm trying to represent in here. So although he's squinting, I'm trying to still keep a little bit of the, you know, it's almost like there is a little fat pad kind of like covering the rest of the orbital bone in here. And then everything else kind of compressing on top of it. I'm gonna build a little bit in there. And I'm gonna stretch this a little bit further too, kind of covering a little bit that gap. And then I'm gonna try to compress this a little bit more. Like I said, like the clay buildup is perfect for this because it respects the form that's next to it instead of like just obliterating it like the other brushes do. So I'm gonna just cover that, and then add some more volume. And I'm gonna go back to my standard and do some more digging here. So mark that area right here. Okay. Then the inside, just mark it very well. And the outside, let's see the way his wrinkle works here, almost like this one. That's the semi cover the rest of the lid in here. Very, it's kind of subtle. And then from here, it covers a little bit like that. So one thing that I do when I'm sculpting like the bigger wrinkles, first off, of course, I'm gonna just mark them with this brush, right? I can use like, let's say 13 or whatever for the standard. So we're just gonna mark right here. And gonna add maybe a little bit more of another one here. Like I was talking about yesterday, I'm trying to mark like the primary and secondary forms at the same time. And that's something that I normally do, you know, it's like unless I'm sculpting from a cube or a sphere, that I have to actually really be careful with the primary forms first and really define them. In this case here, the model I started with had a little bit of a structure before, so it's not like I have to reinvent the wheel. But at the same time, is that trap that I was talking about yesterday. Sometimes your brain kind of gets a little lazy, you know? So instead of like starting forcing your way with like just like a very basic shape, I'm actually kind of comfortable with the way certain things are. I'm not even paying attention at this point. And then sometimes that is bad for the likeness, you know, because you miss certain areas you didn't touch because you thought, you know, your brain just told you, you know, it's like, that looks good enough, so I'm not going to touch it. And if you have a sphere, I mean, like, there's no way out. You have to actually find that form. So I'm just going to make, like, with the brush, like with the clay buildup, just go in between those wrinkles and just build up a little bit of volume in here. And then when it comes to this area, right below the eyebrow, I'm just gonna hollow it a little bit. It's gonna get a little bit more flat. And then, so flatter as it gets closer to the eyebrows, a little bit flatter. And then starts to get a little bit more puffy around here, because remember, like, it's a bunch of forms that are basically like in collision with each other. So you're gonna have an echo of this form, right? You have the arc of the eyeball, and then you have the eyelid in here, and then you're gonna have this top fold, all kind of like following the same structure. They have to be overlapping each other. So I'm gonna bring this one in a little bit, because remember, you have to go over the eyeball, and then I'm gonna just smooth it out a tiny bit. And I'm gonna keep working on that. And then, like I said before, when you get like closer to this area here, then it gets a little thinner. So I'm just gonna build with the clay buildup, just a thin, almost like a wrinkle that goes this direction. So it starts from the corner here, and it propagates all the way and tends to do this. I'm gonna do very strong so you can see. So it goes and kind of like hangs, you know, it's almost like a towel, you know, that's hanging in there. So it's like all physics, right? Like, it's the thickness of the skin, like I said, is like way thinner now. And then those things start like hanging. So, you know, the gravity doesn't spare anyone. So let me just get that, trying to follow that structure. So right here, let me just build up a little bit more of a form right here to fill up. Okay, then here, let's move to the mouth area, so I don't spend a whole lot of time. So we are kind of like almost half an hour. It goes pretty fast. It's like, sometimes it surprises me how fast it goes. Okay, so let's just smooth those things out for now, just to have a hint in there. So that looks a little bit better than it was. I think I still can bring this area here up a tiny little bit, and I have to make sure that I'm pulling the actual eyelid and not just the top fold. Okay. Yeah, so he has this kind little face with his smile. It's kind of like, he looked like a nice guy. I never met him, but he looked like a nice guy. Another thing that I do, if I'm working in this area here, and it's a very delicate area at this point, and I have that huge gap that I made deeper on purpose, right? Because I was trying to make sure that the wrinkle isn't there, because I want that overlap. But at this point here, it becomes a little bit hard to control. So one thing I'm gonna do first is gonna be, I'm gonna use the Inflate brush with the 1 or 2 intensity. Let's keep it 1. And I'm gonna go right there, and I'm gonna try to close that gap a little bit, like very, very carefully. I'm just gonna go here. That's why I'm using a very, very low intensity brush. I'm gonna close that gap. You can see like starts closing and pinching in, but very, very subtle stuff, right? So now that gap is not as big anymore. And now what we can do, we're gonna go inside. So let me just go to the side here, and I'm gonna just drag rectangle in there, just select that area. And let's hide all the other subtools. Let's see, these guys. And then let's see what I need here. So yeah, I don't need those guys here. So let's do a lasso selection and eliminate this whole thing. And I don't need this either. Oh, too much. A little bit less like that. And I don't need this. Something like that. So now I have the folding here completely accessible, right? So from the top here, what we're gonna do, you're gonna do a little tweaking. Remember, we are just echoing those forms, starting from the eyeball, and then we have like 2 steps. So I'm gonna try to echo that form and make more of an arch that actually makes more sense. It's hard to see those things if you don't go inside of the model. So yeah, it's good to go like inside of the mouth and the eyes from time to time and just check things out. So just gonna smooth it out in there, and I'm gonna make sure that there is no you know, crossing of the geometry. There is no explosion happening here, because remember, like if you use this the inflate and it's too strong, for example, here if I try, you know, it's like at some point you're gonna start exploding like that, right? And then all of a sudden the displacement is going to be a mess in that area. So since we use some inflate, I'm just making sure that when I'm inside here, I'm actually, you know, being very careful with the form itself, and then using the smooth brush very carefully as well. So I'm going to go here with smooth brush, make sure that I get that form nice and clean. Right, and then when I go there, now I have like, it looks a little bit more correct. And then of course the lid itself here looks super flat. What I tend to do with the lid, I try to pull the top one, right, a little bit further, like further than the bottom one. So at this point here is almost like they are almost at the same level. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add some volume to this edge right here. And some more volume, and then that way when I start smoothing out towards the center in there, then I can get a little bit more of a natural angle, right, like for the lid. Let's get that, like with the pressure sensitivity, just control a little bit more here, and then let's do that. Well, that works a little bit better. So the fold is starting to look a little better. Then when it gets to the corners in here, also it's nice if you can pull it more towards the eyeball as well. So you get a little bit more of like this S curve towards the end in there. Of course, like it's very different depending on the age of the person you're modeling. But I mean, like I said, like older person, the skin gets thinner, and then things get a little bit more like they start compressing and deforming more easily than having someone with a very elastic skin, like a young person, right? Like, and things are kind of like stay in place a little bit more. So let's unhide this. Right, so let's try to fix the mouth a little bit in the teeth, because it seems like the teeth lost a little bit of the volume that I had before. Also, the nose, I was noticing his nose, it has like, it's much more, it has more structure than what I have right now. So around here, the tip, for example, if I look at the reference in there, first, it has less volume in this area, so it's kind of like it's a little sharper at the top. Like that. So we're gonna add a little bit more of that line for now, just as a reference, even if I have to reduce it. And then when it gets to the tip in here, remember that there's a lot going on with the facial expression, so everything is getting pulled up, but the tip of the nose is kind of locked in place. So it's almost like I have to define the cartilage. Add a little bit more volume here for the cartilage, and I can actually exaggerate those flat planes that I normally use on the side here. Just exaggerate a little bit more, and I'm gonna pull up this corner a little bit more like that. So when I look from this angle here, it's gonna start looking a little bit more like the reference. I'm gonna pull this up as well, and the thickness of those guys, it's sometimes we are tempted to do like very thick, but it's actually, if you look at some references like noses from you know, from underneath, it's kind of like it's fairly thin, this wall in here on the sides. Of course, like I said before, like there's a lot of exceptions for any rule you can find in anatomy. Seems like you find all those rules in books and everything, and then you see someone at some point, I was like, he breaks all those rules. Like, holy moly! So you're gonna find like all kinds of variations for humans, which is kind of awesome. Which is really cool too if you're creating creatures, right? Like, look for unusual faces. I love unusual faces, especially. I feel bad for the people, of course, with the physical defects and things like that. But I see beauty in that. You know, there is a lot of very interesting forms with those unusual types of people. You know, there is beauty in there for sure if you look at that way. You know, I even thought about doing a series at some point. You know, it's just like people with physical disabilities and make a bunch of models, like kind of like telling stories around that would be cool. You know, it's like this different ideal of beauty, I guess. But anyway, so the nose now has a little bit more of a definition. I'm gonna puff it up the sides here a little bit more, get more form in here, and move on to the lips. So the lips, I think I had it before and I kind of lost a little bit. I'm gonna pull, it seems like the top lips, they are a little bit higher. So there's a bit, it's almost like, it's kind of like a Joker kind of shape that he has, you know, or had. Unfortunately, Stan is not with us anymore. But so he has this very interesting shape. It goes higher here on the sides and flatter, of course. Like I said, like there is a smile, so there is a loss of volume because everything is compressed against the teeth. And then this area here seems like it's a little bit, yeah, there's another thing that's happening here in the reference. I can see the very corner in here. Seems like the corner itself, if I paint here so you can see this corner here, it looks like it's incorrect, the correct spot. But there's something else happening here. You remember, like everything is subtlety, right? Like there are certain things just like gonna pass by, never gonna notice, but some stuff like it's, so if I get like this area here, this little point I'm gonna have to pull down. So I'm gonna pull down just this little corner here of the mouth. I'm gonna pull it down because he has the little dimple here. So when he goes down, then I'm gonna pull this area here as well. So I'm gonna bring the whole thing down. And everything that you see here is basically inside of his mouth is the volume Some people have that. I have that actually. When I smile, you can see the inner corner of my mouth like that. So you can see like the inner structures in there. So I have that same kind of thing, you know. Some people don't have it. Some people, you cannot see that. But with this character, he has a ton of it. So I'm gonna just see like the top is pretty screwed up. So I'm gonna just remove that whole volume here. And I still have to do that treatment I did with the bottom lips to add some volume, right? This one. Although the top one is compressed against the teeth, so it should be a little bit more deflated. But for now, I'm just pulling everything up like very roughly. So everything is out of the way here first. And then I'm gonna go to work on those inner structures in here for the inner side. Those are great for biting, right? Like if you have a lot of meat inside of like the walls of your mouth, like I do, I have so many scars in there. I can like, if I rub my tongue in there, I can feel like all those bumps from like 47 years of biting things. Probably less than that. I didn't have teeth. But yeah, it's crazy, man. All this stuff here is painful. So yeah, he has all the little inner structures in there. It's kind of interesting. He has very well pronounced, and they basically touch his teeth when you have the teeth up. So you have that. So it's very characteristic, right? Like each person has very characteristic features, and in his case, that's one of the things I noticed. So his teeth looks like it's longer in the reference. I had like that when I first did the sketch, when I started it, and then I kind of lost it yesterday. For some reason, I started poking around. I was like, oh, it looks like it's not as long, and then it turns out it was pretty long. I did a caricature of Stan Winston a long time ago. There was a mini challenge at CGTalk, and it was about Stan Winston right after he passed away. And it was about like, we had about a month to do an image of representing Stan Winston, an homage or something like that. And I entered the challenge, and it was like there are no prizes involved. It's just a mini challenge, just like for the sake of paying homage. And then Alex Oliver, my friend from Brazil, who is a great sculptor. He had just started doing CG stuff, and he was already kicking butt. I mean, like, he's so good. And then he was doing amazing stuff already. And then he entered the challenge. And in my mind, I had like, okay, I'm pretty competitive, right? Like I did a bunch of challenges on CGTalk. And in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to just do a caricature of Stan Winston. And the caricature was based on a painting from Sebastian Kruger, who is an amazing caricature guy, right? There's this amazing Rolling Stones and stuff. You have to check it out. It's incredible. And then I started doing the challenge like just with this portrait in mind. And Kruger's portrait, he had like half of the face of Stan Winston was a monster, and the other half was his face. So I was like, I'm just going to do mirroring so that way I can have a portrait of Stan. And I was like, yeah. So I started it. And then Alex actually entered the challenge, right? And the guy is a freak of nature because he produced so fast. He's like a very fast sculptor. So he started doing a bunch of models, man, all of a sudden, right? And I was like, man, now I'm going to have to compete with this guy. How am I going to win this thing if I have to do a bunch of models, right? And then we kind of like, it was kind of cool because in my mind, it was like, okay, so Alex doesn't texture. So that's how we're going to get him, because I'm going to texture all my models. And screw that. I'm not modeling just Stan Winston anymore. Now the shit got serious. So I was like, I started modeling Pumpkinhead. And Pumpkinhead is actually a character that it's for, I think it's a short movie or is a full feature movie. I don't remember. That it was actually produced by Stan Winston. So kind of like it was an in-house project, I guess. And it was super cool, it was like, it's an interesting creature. So I modeled that creature, and I modeled also the Terminator, of course, because Stan worked on Terminator. Not Terminator, sorry, the Predator. So I worked on the Predator, and the Terminator, of course, he worked, but I didn't model that. And what else did I do? Oh, the T-Rex for Jurassic Park. So a bunch of models, It's like at the end I had like 4 different models. And then Alex, he had like a kind of like a diorama with all those models from the different movies from Stan Winston. And yeah, so we kind of like went head to head in that competition. It was pretty cool, you know. And at the end of the competition, we actually, both me and Alex, we wiped the entire thing. We got all the prizes. Not the prize because there were no prizes involved, but I mean all the main, you know, we won the whole thing. Like he won like best diorama, and I won for best character was for the pumpkin head, and I won for best portrait, that was the Stan Winston caricature, and yeah, stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. It was kind of like we kept all in Brazil, man. It was awesome. Talking about Brazil, today I was talking to Sven at work, and I was like, what's wrong with, like, you know, it's like those Italians and Russians. I mean, like, holy moly, those guys are so talented. We are looking at some portfolios of people from Italy and Russia, and those guys, Jesus Christ. It's kind of like my explanation was like, oh, those guys live and breathe like art, you know. It's like you go outside in a plaza and you have all those amazing sculptures in there. Like since you're a baby, you know, it's like you passing by those places and seeing this amazing artwork everywhere. And then United States, I mean, like you can go to museums and stuff, but it's not everywhere. It's not like an old country, right? Like that, like for example, like with the culture of Europe, that you have all these amazing sculptures like influenced by the Greeks and the Romans and, you know, all that stuff, like the you know, where art actually started being produced as art, right? I love the, we're almost at time to open the mics, now 15 minutes. I love this thing about art history, right? And I always talk about how things went from completely symbolic, which was the art in the medieval times, right? Like it was completely symbolic. So when you look at the medieval art, for example, the sky is always painted in gold. So you're gonna see like the sky is gold, and the saints, they all have halos. Everything is very symbolic, you know. It's like it's this different world. Even the cathedrals, for example, if you look at a cathedral, the size of those things, they're so massive. And it's a psychological kind of game that's played, which is basically like you have to feel insignificant in the presence of God, right? So God is so great that you feel like you're nothing when you enter one of those gigantic cathedrals. So that's how the church kind of like kept people, you know. It's like, oh, okay, so you're nothing, God is everything, right? So you're, and then when the Protestants, you know, like the whole movement started happening, there was kind of like a marketing campaign that had to happen because the church was losing a lot of people, moving to the, you know, Protestants and everything. So, for example, like a guy like Caravaggio back in the day, this was like way after, you know, was the Baroque period. I'm skipping a lot here, but for example, like Caravaggio was the guy who, you can see the contrast between the medieval art and the art done in the Baroque period, which was basically like Caravaggio representing, if he's going to represent a saint, and it's Saint Peter. And Saint Peter, for example, was a fisherman. So instead of like representing someone who is like a magical entity, who has a halo in a golden sky and everything, like in the medieval times, now he's actually going and finding a fisherman, an actual fisherman, as a reference, and representing a saint as someone like us. So we can actually see ourselves as those saints as well. And in that case, you know, basically like it becomes something closer to you, something you can identify better. So it's kind of like kind of like a marketing thing, you know. And like in religion or not, I mean, religion helped to, you know, it's like to shape all the art world that we know, right? Like all those incredible pieces of art that we see in the churches and cathedrals and museums, you know, it's like it's all shaped like guys like Michelangelo, right? Like those guys are paid by the Pope, and like you know, it's like they made a fortune just like doing stuff for the church. But going back to the symbolic stuff, like the medieval times, it's so interesting, you know. It's like you see the transition that happened, you know. It's like in this period that there was no perspective, just like starting, you know. It's like you're starting to see some stuff like studies of perspective, but until the Renaissance, when you know, it's like people fell in love again, you know, it's like with the excavations happening and rediscovering all those amazing sculptures from the Greeks. All of a sudden there is this thing about like what makes this piece so incredible, you know, it's like this ideal of the beauty, you know, it's like, well, why is that? And then they start like studying again the proportions and kind of like trying to put in books, right, like in register proportions and how things actually work to make that piece look so good, you know, it's like an athlete, like perfectly sculpted. It's so interesting when you go to the Louvre. You can see like there are a lot of incredible sculptures in there from the Greek period, which is so amazing. And then you go to the d'Orsay, and then you see like a different type of sculptors much later than the Greeks, who are much more like virtuos, right? Like they sculpt everything, like the drapery and everything is in the marble. But in terms of the essence of the characters and the proportions and everything that was defined by the Greeks at that point, it's still our ideal of beauty today, you know? So isn't it amazing that you can go like all those decades and centuries, you know, and millennia or whatever, not millennia, but, you know, centuries, and still have the same ideals of beauty that were studied by them, defined by them, and studied by the Romans and all those guys like Dürer and those guys who came after, you know, it's like they start like doing studies over all those things and defining what proportions are and what's a hero proportion, right? Like the 8 heads, or more natural, like 7.5 heads, or whatever it is. It's so interesting, you know, that everything started with those guys who were basically unknowns back in the day. Let's say like the first guys doing those sculptures like for monuments and things like that. Let's say like the Egyptians, right? Like those gigantic things. Those guys are basically anonymous people, you know. It's like maybe a few of them you're gonna know the names or whatever, but they're basically anonymous. They are not different from like an artisan guy, you know. Someone has a task to build like some pots for cooking or whatever, and those guys, their task is to actually build those gigantic monuments. But there is no like authors, right? So everything is kind of like, you know, you're part of that section of the society and you're in charge of doing that. It's your job. But then just later on that, you know, like you really start to see like authors, right? Like people signing their name in their pieces and stuff and becoming known for the work they did as artists. But up to that time, you know, it's like I think there's not a lot of egos involved, because there is no, like, you know, it's like you're not different from the pottery guy. So, which is kind of interesting. I think it's an interesting concept, because we have a lot of egos happening today. And it's kind of interesting that, you know, it's like if you think of yourself as just like, you know, someone like contributing to society with the work you do, but without being more or less important than anyone, you know, it's like I think it's a more interesting approach. Let's see our time here, 10:22. Still a few minutes until I open for you guys, and then we can start doing some move this stuff to do some renders and check some proportions. Just get this here. But I love art history, man, and all this stuff. It really fascinates me. And it's a shame that I don't live in Europe, you know. It's like I would be probably like a museum rat. I would be all the time inside of a museum. And I'm jealous that you guys have that. You guys who live in Spain and there, you know, like have those awesome museums. I have a collection here, the Museo del Prado, which is pretty amazing. Like it's an old collection. And back in the day, you bought the books and they would give you the VHS collection. So I have this collection of books and VHS. I just don't have a VCR anymore to play them, but I used to play all the time. And the cool thing about those are the you know, they dissect those pieces. So they get one of those pieces and they X-ray them in a very careful way, whatever they did, like techniques they used in there. So they X-ray them so they can see the inner, like the underlying paintings or layers or sketches underneath those things. And sometimes you can see different versions of the same paint. just by like X-raying it, you can see like revealed in there, which is really, really cool. You can see the position of the arm was in a different spot like originally. And then all of a sudden you can see, you know, at some point the artist either directed by someone or on his own, you know, it's just like change the position of the arm and ends up like in a different way in the final piece. But you can see the register in there, you know, the mistake or the optional thing, right? Everything fascinates me. So the mouth and the eyes got I think got a little bit closer again, but still he has this shape that's much more exaggerated than that. He has like this kind of pretty. It's almost like it's a cartoon. He has a cartoon mouth. I'm gonna just add that. And like I said, like, you know, likeness takes days or weeks or whatever it takes, you know. Sometimes I just abandon something altogether and then go back to it at some point. But it's a constant chase, you know. It's like the more you look, the more you're gonna find stuff. And there are days that you are happy with it, and then, you know, just a few days later, it's like, man, it doesn't look anything like it. And then, you know, you keep chasing it. But you know, the easy route would be to have like a bunch of you know, blueprints, and that would solve my problem like instantly. I would just like move stuff around until I match those lines, and it would be easy. But then in terms of you know, if I'm working professionally and trying to get the likeness like that, that would save me a ton of time, and probably that would be the best way to do it anyway. But since it's my personal work, I'm not taking anything from that, you know. It's like I'm not learning anything if I'm just like basically like putting stuff on top of each other and then copying it, you know. It's just yeah, blueprints to me, they are no fun if it's for personal work. I'd rather like struggle and really spend a good chunk of time, you know. It's like no matter how much time it takes, as long as I take something out of the experience, you know, to me that's more important than getting the cool results and becoming an instant web star. So many web stars out there, man. People want to be famous like without putting any work, you know, just like taking shortcuts for everything. And I'm glad that in this group, at least, you know, it's like I know most of you guys works, and you know, it's like you guys work for the stuff you do. So that's very cool to see. But professionally, by all means, you know, it's like use all the shortcuts you can, because people are expecting speed and you have to deliver whatever they want. But if you're not in this world to learn, right, like new things every day, then there's no meaning for life. Like you have to learn, struggle, and get frustrated and get jealous of other talented people out there. It's all normal. We're all like humans, right? We're all humans. Especially those youngsters, you know. It's like, Jesus Christ, why you guys have to be so talented so young? Could you wait a little bit, you know? Just gonna add the, okay, so got my alarm here. So that means it's time to open the mics. Just about 2 minutes, I guess. Just gonna define that just to have a reference, and I'm gonna smooth it out again. Just have a very, very subtle line. And it's interesting because his lips are fairly smooth in his smile in there. It's not like you see a ton of wrinkles. So I think the texture is gonna play the biggest role in there, I think. And the hair, like I added this stuff like very quickly yesterday. The volumes are not there yet, but it was just a way to get stuff in there. Use the same technique I showed yesterday, just selecting and then extracting it. But for now, I'm just not gonna use it. So I'm just gonna turn off this stuff. And let me open the mics for you guys. All right. So like yesterday, to prevent the problem with the echo, So if you guys are not talking, if you can just like keep muted, and then as soon as you want to talk, you just like unmute it, and yeah. By now we kind of know the drill. Everything good so far?
Yeah, good.
Awesome.
Yeah, great.
How about you? You sound like a little bit down today.
I'm down?
Sounds like a little bit down, don't get me wrong. Is everything okay with you?
I think so, man. It's just like at some point you get tired, right?
Yeah, being tired.
Yeah, I mean, like I get this, I get on a roll sometimes and I go to sleep like every night, like pretty late. But then when it gets more towards the end of the week, I'm kind of wiped. And what happened, what's happening with the class is that it takes forever just to process those videos, you know. I finish the class and you think like 11:30 I'm done. But what happens is that it takes about like 20 minutes just to process the file first. And then after that's processed, I upload to Vimeo. And then Vimeo takes about, let's say, another 30 minutes to upload. And then once it's in Vimeo, then it has to recompress in your own format, like whatever that is. And it takes sometimes close to an hour. So basically altogether it's like an hour and a half. So if I do like everything straight away, I cannot go to bed before, let's say, 1:30 at least, right? So I kind of like a slave of that. And then of course I want to keep doing my work a little bit more. So during that time that's actually compressing everything, I'm just trying to keep sculpting. But then at the end of the night, I mean, like I'm posting stuff at 2 or 2:30 and going to bed and being up at like 7:30 to help with the kids. I drive one of our kids to school.
Well, very nice of you, man. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. Because I want to make sure you guys like in different time zones, you know, it's like you have access to the video as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For example, me.
Yeah, exactly.
I start to watch them, you know, at work.
Yep.
You know, after the session, after 2 hours after the session ends, or 1.5 hours after the session ends, I guess. So as you said, as soon as possible, you know, upload the videos on Vimeo.
Yep.
Nice. That's nice. Thanks.
Sure. So what I'm gonna do now, see, like I have like a bunch of subdivision levels. The lowest one is 23,000, and I'm gonna go to 93 and then 375. So at 375, I'm gonna export this way because at this point we don't have displacement maps. So I wanna make sure I get the most detail for our test renders. So I'm gonna click export. And so Stan Winston, let's go to OBJ. That's the structure I created, right? Like ZBrush, reference, OBJ, and images. That's what I have for now. And then once I'm in Maya, I'm going to complete this folder here with the rest of the structure. So I'm going to go to OBJ. And the only thing available right now is glasses. So I just put like simple names with a number in there just to see the version. And I try to synchronize when I export different things. Everything is renamed to 2 and so on. So just going to go to head. And yeah, another thing sometimes I do, I just put like if it's medium resolution, so MR, or lower resolution LR, and high resolution HR. And so I'm gonna keep like medium resolution. I'm gonna export it. My computer was sleeping, so probably gonna take a little bit, but it's gonna wake up soon. There you go. And then I'm not gonna be worried about hair or beard for now, but I need his teeth. His teeth is really, you can really see what's going on. Okay, so let's get the top one. So teeth upper. So I'm gonna export that one too. Teeth upper, R1. And then the last thing is gonna be the eyes. So eyes, R1. So let me just save my file. Like I said before, you can either save your file here, your tool, or your project. When you save the project using the file menu, you have the option to save with the undo history. So, you know, the file gonna be really, really big at the end, but at least you have access to the whole history. So if you wanna record time lapse, or for example, for the entire section of sculpting, right, you can just like use that. But in my case, I'm just like turning it off. I actually recorded a couple of them with the history. I can show you here. So see if I go here, you see the size of the files. For example, I have this 5 here, stand 5. It's like only 8 megabytes, but then I have 5 age, which is with the history. That's 1.6 gigabytes. So this one I can actually open and then recreate like an entire like time lapse if I want to. But at this point, I don't want to, like time lapse anything from now. I just want to save space in my disk. So stand 9, let's just save it. And the advantage of saving the project is that everything is saved, including like all the different tools you have loaded and the shaders and everything else. So it's saved. So let's switch to Maya. Let's open it. Yeah, like I said before, like if you have Maya 2018, that's fine too. It's not very different from 2019. And 2019 apparently has some more interesting stuff when it comes to viewport, but I'm not using a lot of real time right now. So that's the Maya interface. Of course, most of you should know. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna import those meshes in here. And before I do that, I'm gonna have to repeat what I said before. That's a very important step, which is like when you go to import, and this is just repeating what I already said before, but just make sure you guys get it. When you go to import and you click this little box, the option box here, right? This little box here. So if I switch to OBJ, if you scroll all the way down, by default, you're gonna have this multiple objects checked. That's what Maya does. You're gonna switch to single object because you gotta make sure that all the polygons come as a single thing. If you have polygroups or whatever, it's gonna tend to split your model in multiple parts. It's gonna be a mess. So once you have single object selected, then you can just like save settings, right? Another thing is the namespaces here. Normally, like by default, Maya tries to add like namespaces. So when you import something, for example, like an entire scene from Maya, normally it comes with a kind of like a prefix. So all the names from that point on, everything is renamed that way. So the way to actually to deal with that, I turn off namespaces normally, right? And then instead of like all nodes, I just put clashing nodes. And for the string, I just click this is string and I keep empty. And then when I import anything, it just comes like without any of the prefixes and shit. So this is gonna, I think, work just for OBJ. I don't know if I switch to Maya, if it's gonna switch to, but I can check. So save settings, and then I can now import, right, with single object on. So I'm gonna go to OBJ. Oh, I'm under Michelangelo here. So another thing, before I even start importing anything from that scene, let's set a project here. So to set a project, let's just check. It's very important because like you want to make sure you're working in an environment that's the entire project is it's basically like concealed inside of that environment. So from that point, any renders you do and everything goes always inside to the right folders. So let's look at what we have as a structure here for now. So let's see. We have Kris personal works in here. And then I have all those different folders. And I have my Stan Winston folder right here, right? So if I copy this one to memory, Ctrl+C, and I'm just gonna go here and I'm gonna say set project, actually project window, right? File project window. And then here, I'm just gonna see my location says Kris personal projects in Michelangelo, but I'm gonna do something here. I'm gonna click that one, and then let's just plug it in here. So it says Stan Winston. Since I already have the location under projects in there, I'm just gonna remove everything. I'm gonna keep just Stan Winston in here as the current project. And I'm gonna keep everything default. See, there's a bunch of folders here. I could potentially rename, but I always keep things default. So I'm gonna just accept it, right? So now that I accept it, if I go back to that folder that, remember, I had just ZBrush, OBJ, images, and whatever. Which one was the other one? Reference, right? So I had only those folders. Now I have all those folders in here from Maya. So that's how I keep my structure for everything that I'm doing. From that point, if I go back to Maya here now, if I press open scene, you're gonna source the Stan Winston scenes straight away, right? So it's like everything from this point on, if I'm gonna save something, it's gonna point always to this project. So so I'm gonna go back to the import thing. So I'm going to go to File, Import, make sure it's saved in there, single object. Yep, single object, import. And I'm going to go to OBJ, one step up, OBJs, and I'm going to import the head first. And remember, like the first thing we did was to rescale the head. So we should be like in world scale right now. It should be about like 8.5 inches tall, right? Now that I ported it, if you press G, G actually is a shortcut for doing this, repeating the last thing, right? In this case here, for whatever reason, it's bringing the project window instead of bringing the import. But anyway, let's go to import in here. Let's try with eyes. Let's press G. Okay, now it worked. And I'm going to import the teeth. So I have the 3 pieces in now. So if you're not familiar with Maya, you have like a bunch of different interfaces you can load in here. So I have the interactive room, blah, blah, blah. I normally keep the interactive room as my main interface. And to have access to the attributes of each one of the objects, you're always going to click the object, and you're going to see things going to populate in here. You're going to have the tool settings. So whatever tool you have selected, one of those on the side here. You're going to have the access to the things, the attributes of the tools, and you have access to the attribute of the object itself. If by any reason this disappeared for you, if you click the object and you press Ctrl+A, it always forces you to go back to attribute editor. So Ctrl+A access it. We are not going to do displacement map yet because we don't have displacements, but everything happens in this interface here. So if you look at the attribute editor, you're going to see there's a tab called Arnold. If you expand that one, you're going to repeat those settings later on, but just kind of like as a preview, what I do, I scroll down all the way until I find this SSS set name in here. And this is something that's overlooked. That's basically like you can define sets for your subsurface scattering. So if you want to make sure that all the subsurface objects in the scene, for example, the eyeball and the skin, they're going to be considered as a single thing. So like they're going to have like a perfect transition between the 2 surfaces. You have to name them the same. So for example, like I normally use this name here, shared SSS, and then instead of like having a hard line in between the 2 of them, you're going to have like this very smooth transition between them. So first thing is the SSS name, set name. Subdivisions. Here normally, again, like once I have everything from ZBrush, I'm gonna explain again, but normally what I do is switch to Catmull Clark, and then it all depends of, how many subdivision levels you wanna try to recover, but probably gonna go all the way to just like 4 or 5 if I have a model that's kind of fairly low res. And then let's say like 4 in here. In this case, I'm not subdividing because the mesh, we are just gonna do some quick test renders. But let's say if I wanna subdivide the mesh at render time, that's gonna be here. So let's see, iterations 3. And then for adaptive space, I normally use object. For smoothing, I actually keep everything linear because it comes from ZBrush all linear, unless you use the SUV option in there, but I normally don't. It's still a little buggy, so I use linear. So that means it doesn't smooth the UVs at all. And then under displacement attributes, keep it 1, unless you want to crank it so you can go like 1.2 or whatever. The bounce padding and the scalar 0 value, basically like in the settings, when you go through that stuff in ZBrush exporting, what we do with ZBrush, instead of like keeping 0.5 for your 0 value, so basically like the base level, and that way is a gray scale, right? Not gray scale, it's a gray map, so basically 50% gray, which means like you can export the 16-bit maps and you still get all the values represented in the map. So like we're gonna see whites and blacks in there. By default, Arnold works with the 0 at with the base level at 0. So that means it's completely black. Okay, so if it's completely black, how you get the negative values? Because there's nothing blacker than black. I was like, yeah, it doesn't if you work with 16-bit maps, but in this case, we're going to be using 32-bit maps. And 32-bit maps go below 0. So it can actually displace like below 0 and over. So we're going to keep the scalar 0 value here. So that's going to be our setting. And then there's this very clever thing that's called enable auto bump. And the auto bump, what it happens is that, remember, like we are talking about the subdivision levels in here, iterations. If I have 3 subdivision levels, but my model, for example, like I'm using HD geometry, and that means I have a total of like, I don't know, 6 or 7 subdivision levels. Instead of like subdividing everything and rendering everything all the way to 7 would take forever just to calculate that, because it has to subdivide everything at the render time. You just subdivide 3 times, and then you use an auto bump. So all the rest of the detail, the fine resolution detail, is going to be represented as a bump. So you're going to get the impression that it's all there, but it's actually not, right? So it's a way to save time. Of course, like the higher you go with the iterations in here, the more detail you're going to have, like in small folds and wrinkles and things like that, especially around the eyes. But not enough that it becomes like unusable, right? Like so basically you're going to use like I said, 4, maybe 5, depending. But again, we're going to go over all this stuff later. So I'm going to just, at this point, just put back to 0 or 1, just like one subdivision level is fine. And so this model would be set to apply displacement map at this point, but we are not using that. So in ZBrush, in Maya, sorry, how can I move this interface here? You guys are not seeing it, but there's a little interface. Okay, I'm gonna move the other corner.
I am seeing that.
Oh, you see it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so now it disappeared, right?
Yeah, now that's appeared.
Awesome. Yeah, I thought it was something that I was the only one seeing that stuff. So that's great. So now the way you access the Hypershade in ZBrush, in Maya, there is this little sphere in here. But the other way is if you go to Window, and if you go to Render Editors, there is a Hypershade that's the same icon. So you can click on it, and then you're going to see this interface here. So this is where we assign, oh, just click something there. This is where you're going to assign all the shaders, right? So you're going to make it a little bit smaller here so you can see it. And then you're going to have like the old school shaders for Maya at the very top in here. So this is all Maya shaders. But of course, if you're rendering with Arnold, Arnold actually is smart enough to actually convert most of those into Arnold format. So sometimes you can just start your scene with the actual surfaces from Maya, and then Arnold still is gonna render it. But some stuff in Arnold are very specific. For example, like the Uber shader for Arnold, it's called, if you go to shader in here, it's called AI standard surface. So basically, like this material here, you can make any material with it, right? You have other specific stuff. You have like the ambient occlusion, you have wireframe, hair, things like that. But for physical materials, it can be anything. It can be skin, can be metal, anything is the same shader. So it's standard surface, right? So that's how you start like adding things to it. You're gonna have, you know, it's like all those parameters in here. You have a lot of presets. So if you click presets in here, you're gonna see a lot of stuff like balloon, blah blah blah, milk, right? Skin. So you have like replace. You have even this, like they can blend with whatever parameters you have set. Just blend a little bit of you know, those parameters, or completely replace them, right? So it's pretty cool. You can start with this because this is all presets, and they're gonna look great from the get-go, right? But the skin, of course, I like to have my own flavor of it. So let's just click like skin here. Let's see what parameters it comes with, because I never tried actually to see what it does. But you see like the scale in here, the scale is set to 1. And the scale, using this the real world scale for my characters, what I'm gonna use here normally is 0. Anywhere between 120 to 0.150, something like that. Now that we reduce the head a little bit, I would say like maybe like 0.110 would be something more like what we want. But in this case here, we are not going to explore the skin just yet. You're going to just bring back here in if you have like any shader, if you select it, you can export from here, right? So you can have like an MB Maya binary file. Or you can import. So I exported before for another scene that I have, and I'm going to import it now. I have this this shader. Let's see. Let's switch from OBJ to Maya scenes. And I have this clay green NSP here. So if I import it, I can show you what I have, the parameters. So I'm gonna click on it, just click clay green, and I'm gonna do a graph input and output connections. So when I do that, now I can see everything that's connected to it. Just maximize it. So I have just like 2 things connected. See, like it's from Alex Gray, the one of the models I was working on. So what's happening here is like I have a map plugged in there. Normally, I do that because it's like if I have any detail in the map, something it's like slightly painted in ZBrush, like a preview thing, just like a little mask or whatever, I just bring in here and I mix it with the subsurface color. But that's not the case now. So let's just look inside of this shader to see how things are plugged. I normally, if I'm doing just like clay renders like that, I use an ambient occlusion shader, which you can find here under, let's see if it's utility or, is it utility? No, let's light, is this shader? Yeah, under shader. So ambient occlusion is right here at the top. So normally when you're trying to connect things in Maya, you just click on it. It creates a new node in here, right? So the easiest way is to actually click your node, your main node, the main shader, and then you just middle click this guy, and you can just like drop anywhere. So just like you can see right there, I can drop anywhere, and this is going to be plugged. In this case here, what I have, if I can just disconnect this one, let's pretend this is the one. So if I want to connect this one to the color channel, so I just middle click, drag and drop right there, and now it's plugged. Right. So if I expand it, that's what I have inside in there. Ambient occlusion by default, let me just make sure that I have this color saved. It's white all the way to black, right? But then in this case here, what I'm doing, I'm actually creating a color that I know, just in case if you guys want to take note or whatever, this is what I'm using for my clay, and you can copy this later. So, it's like HSV, or if I switch to RGB 0 to 255, those are the colors 41, 38, 22. And then back to HSV, those are the values. So this is what I'm using for the ambient occlusion. So that means I'm replacing the color of the main shader with an ambient occlusion shader. So the lightest color is going to be this one, and the darkest color is going to be this one. And those are the parameters I'm using. You can tweak them, get like more spread out, or more samples if you want to get the sharper, more smooth transition between the shaded parts. And then here, let's explore what I have for the subsurface. So for subsurface, you see I'm not using even 120 like I said before. That was more like for skin. So I'm trying to keep a little bit more solid, but still have a little bit of subsurface. So that's like 0.80. That's what I have right here. But in this case here, I have like a random walk selected, but I already have the Arnold, updated Arnold installed here, which doesn't come with Maya, but you can download from the website if you have Maya installed. You can download the Arnold installer and just switch to random walk 2, which is better. And then the other thing about the subsurfacing here is that I'm not mixing all the way to 100% subsurface. You see that changes in there in the preview. So basically like 100% subsurface is like this. So everything's controlled by this parameters here. But if I click this and I put at 50%, so 0.5, now the subsurface is being mixed with the color from the base. So basically like, the diffuse channel is going to influence this, right? So it's 50% diffuse and 50% subsurface at this point. For the radius, I'm just, this is what the color of the subsurface is going to look like. Not the surface, but the subsurface itself. So I'm using this color here. Again, like you can take note if you want, but I can make this shader available actually for you guys. It's fine. And then for the subsurface color here, now we have that map plugged. And at this point here, I don't want that map plugged in here. I don't need it because I don't have anything, any detail I don't have anything painted in polypaint anyway. So I'm gonna just remove this, break it. Let me just double check if I have any color. No, the color balance here seems okay. Doesn't seem like I have anything plugged. Okay. So let me just remove this node. I can just delete from here and then click on it. And then the subsurface color, now I can get something similar to what I had here before. So remember I picked that color for the NSP. So if I click the color here, every time you click a color in Maya, it kind of like plugs that color as the first in this slot in here, so it kind of memorizes it for you. So now if I switch all the way back to subsurface color and I click this one, it's right there. So if I click it, it already repeated. So so that's what it is. And now how you assign this shader to the object. So you click the object in the viewport, and then you can just click your main shader, right click, and then you say assign material to the viewport selection. Or you can just like drag and drop to the viewport as well, it works. So in this case, that's what I'm gonna do. And since I'm gonna do this for all the objects, let me just assign straight away to everything. So now we have assigned the materials. Let's start saving this first. So let's save this. Let's go to Stan Winston, and then under scenes. So let's save it as Stan. Oops. Stan render. Let's see, Arnold. Actually, .1 MB. Okay, so Stan Arnold rend test. Okay, saved. So at this point here, of course, if I like to render anything, Arnold normally, if you're using Maya, Maya has its own like a render viewport, but I like using the Arnold one instead of Maya's. So you can do like the render view, open Arnold render view here. It's gonna open something like this. And it's pretty cool that you have control for different parameters here. You know, it's like you can control the exposure and all kinds of stuff. But before we do that, let's set up like what resolution we want. So I'm gonna go to this one here, the display render settings. And then the first thing you're gonna realize is that now that we set the project, you can see right there at the top, if I save anything from here, go straight to the right folder, that's images, right? So I'm just gonna start with the, let's see, Stan A. I keep doing this like A, B, C, blah, blah, blah. So, and then another thing you can do, instead of like single frame here in this tab, you can just select like the frame number and then the extension, right? So let's say later on, if you have a bunch of camera angles saved as animation, you can just set like start frame to end frame, for example, and render like straight away like 10 different poses. That's what I do normally before I go to sleep. You know, it's like just set up like a bunch of renders. In the morning, I just post on Instagram or something like that. So we have this set up, and I'm keeping everything in image format in EXR, which is the best one, in my opinion. So, and then the presets, you have a bunch of things. You have full HD, blah, blah, blah. But because we are talking about Instagram, normally what I do, I just like do 900 by 900 or 1000 by 1000 or 1200 by 1200, something like that. In this case, we're gonna just keep 900 by 900. And then under Arnold render, here is where the anti-alias stuff comes, you know. And this is the one that's gonna increase a lot of times like for rendering. So I start like this. This is the default values, but I would say if you keep everything at 3, that means like those samples are gonna be multiplied by 3, each one of them. Sometimes I use the specular at 4 and the rest at 3 because I wanna get like a sharper specular. Sometimes if you have a lot of displacement map, it gets a little noisy. So I use that at 4. And then from here, you can start with the value of 6, for example. So you see like at 3, I had a maximum of 378 total samples, right? But then if I turn to 6, from 378, it goes from 15 to 1512. So that's gonna give me a better quality for my anti-alias. And then for the filters, you have a bunch of different filters in here, each one produce a different type of result, like a little bit sharper or whatever. You know, it's like the way you basically like samples the hard edges and you know, mixes everything together, right? But I try to use normal like the Gaussian one, and then I just play with this value here, because at the end of the day you can tweak things. One is going to look kind of similar to the next one, different filters, just by tweaking these amounts here. So if I do like 1.5 here, something like that, you can get sharper. And then adaptive sampling, this is something that you can use or not, which is, you know, it's like it's going to adapt and try to, you can define like a maximum camera, for example, like a anti-alias. You can just like select 20. So that's the maximum is going to go from 6 all the way to 20, right? So it might get super slow if you do like that. So I'm going to just keep fixed at 6. And then ray depth in here, if you're using like transparency, things like that, I would recommend, you know, it's like transmission is already at 8. So it means like 8 surfaces you can actually pass through with the refraction, things like that. So not a lot necessary in there. So you play with those values if you need to, you know, if you notice like the reflections or transparencies are not working correctly, you can increase those ones. And then for textures here, by default, it uses the textures in TX. And there's a way that to auto-generate the TX files as well, which is the format that Arnold uses to save memory. It's way faster to run with, render with them. But because I keep testing things and re-importing textures all the time, I normally keep it off and I just use the TIFFs. But if you realize your machine is not handling the TIFFs, I would you know, encourage you guys to use the TX. So I'm just gonna, you know, turn off that and then turn off this one as well. Just keep everything TIFF. And at this point, I don't have any textures anyway, so it doesn't matter. So that's a good start in there. And now the last thing we have to do is actually find some lights. So I can start with an area light. I'm gonna just grow it. Let's see. So there it is. Just grow. And you know, you can try to kind of like use like a kind of like an accurate kind of representation. I'm imagining this is a softbox, so probably like something a little bigger. Of course, the smaller you go, the more you know, direction is going to become, and then the shadow is going to get a little bit more sharper, right? And then the bigger you go, the more diffuse the shadows are. So I'm going to start with a light, like a top light like that. And before I do the first render here, I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to say Camera Settings. And under Camera Settings, I'm going to put Resolution Gate. So now I know exactly what's the area that's going to be rendered, right? So it's going to be inside of this square here. And you see that my camera is pretty much like 35 millimeters right now. Another thing we can do, I'm going to select the View again and click Select Camera. So View, Select Camera. And then here I can define the focal length. Like I was talking before, 85 millimeters would be ideal for like a head and shoulders, right? Or all the way to the chest. Or maybe even like 100 millimeters would be more interesting if you want a little bit flatter than that, right? But 85 for now looks good. So one thing I normally do, I keep a camera like that, and I can even rename my camera. Or we can simply copy this camera. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go to perspective. Actually, not copy, you're gonna just do a new, right? And then with this camera here, what's gonna happen is that I'm gonna use this one to tweak like lighting and things like that. And the other one I'm gonna use just for the renders themselves, right? So if I click this little square here to see like multiple views, so now I have perspective in there, and I can switch this panel here to perspective 1. So this one I'm gonna be using to, you know, to tweak the lighting, and this one is gonna be my render camera. So to make sure that Arnold renders this view, just click it in any area here so Arnold knows that's the one you wanna render. I'm gonna just bring back the render view, and I'm gonna do a little render here and see if it does anything. If it's not rendering anything, that we know that we need more intensity in my specular. Let's get back to here. Let's try that. Let's see. Let's just play it. Let's click that light. And then when I click that light, you're going to see the properties in here on the side. Let me just make it smaller again. So the properties of the area light, it already popped in here. If it didn't, and you have the light selected, like I said, just press Ctrl+A, it's going to pop in here. And then you're going to notice a bunch of things here for the area light. And the first one I'm going to turn off is the normalize. So that one already brought something in there in the image, right? Just by doing that. The samples are going to use 2. So I'm not going to go super high with it, just a little bit. And then here, you're going to have a bunch of different controls. If you want to use temperature, for example, like if you're working with Kelvin, right? Like you want to make like a daylight, like 6,500 or 7,000 for Kelvin, then it's going to be kind of like a colder kind of light. And then if you go like to 3,500, for example, then it's going to be kind of like a warmer light, right? See if it's updating in there. Sometimes it bugs. Is it updating? Let's see. Yeah, now it's yellower. So the intensity is still very low. So I'm going to crank it to, let's say, 5. Maybe a little bit more on that. Let's say 8. And then, like I said, this is the temperature of the color, so in Kelvin. So I'm going to go all the way to 6,500. And now it's more like, you know, kind of like a studio lighting, kind of like a window, right? Like, basically. So this is our first little render test in there. So you see it's still calculating because Arnold works with progressive. So I'm going to just move this light down and towards the front. And this is like the first step to start lighting your scene, right? Of course, like if you use like a studio lighting as a reference, if you have any of those books for lighting, let's see if I have one here handy. Let's see if this one has anything. So this is exposure. This one has some stuff. Yeah, this one might have something interesting. So this book here, if you guys can see, it's called Light, like the Complete Guide to Light. And then inside you're gonna see things like, let's see. It has a lot of the positioning for cameras and reflectors and things like that. Examples of portrait light like that. But I have another one here. Let me see if that's the one I'm looking for. That actually has more information about it. There is one that actually shows from the top all the setup for the lighting. Yeah, well, I'm gonna see, because I thought this was the one here, but it doesn't seem like it has information. Well, I'm gonna look. It's always interesting to get, oh, this one here has it. So yeah, it's the same book I was showing before. So for example, if you look at this image right down here, you're gonna see there's a position of the subject and the position for the softbox and the camera and everything. So it kind of like shows you a little bit the schematic of what's being used, and then it breaks down, what type of light's being used here. Like there's a hair light, and then there's a fill light and things like that. So photography books are very useful for this kind of stuff, to study. I'm using just one light here, but of course, like if you want to use like a 3-light setup, you're probably going to put like a window on the side. It's like one thing that you can do with Arnold is basically so you can duplicate those things, right? So if I want to switch this one with a side light like that to simulate kind of like a window, right there. If I simply press Ctrl+D to duplicate this object here to another light, it's not quite working. It's like he's going to lose some connections because Arnold works very differently. But if I do this, if I go to Edit and I say Duplicate Special, and then I just say like Parent to the World, so I don't want to parent underneath anything else, and just click Duplicate Input Connections. So if you do this, now all the connections are preserved. So those two lights should work now with Arnold. So what I'm going to do with it, I can bring one up like that, or you can do like a, you know, it's like a 45-degree light. It's kind of classic, right? You put 45 in each angle. Let's see, from, we're going to be very roughly anyway. So if I pull to the side, because this is kind of like that the Rembrandt light we're looking for, right? So we kind of like get a little bit of that triangle, the triangle under the right eye. So I'm going to bring up a little bit. So this light here, I can turn it off by just going here and saying illuminates by default. So that light is off now. And then now the only light is the 45-degree light, right? So this one I can make smaller, like I said before. So basically like the intensity is gonna be smaller as well, but the everything like the shadow is gonna be sharper. So I'm gonna go up, and now I can actually tweak the intensity and crank it to double that. Let's say 20. So now I have that light. I have the little triangle underneath the eye in here. I can tweak it to get it perfect, right? Like to get that kind of brown light. And now I can actually click this one here on the side, and I can turn it on again. So illuminate by default. So I have both of them now. And then of course I can make it more artistic by either, like if I'm using color temperature here, I can really go to town with it. I can put like 12,000 here. That makes very bluish, right? If I want more of like a backlight, of course, I can just like go around with it and you know, have a little bit more of something like that. So like very artistically, you can just direct the whole thing, right? But this is basically like how you start lighting your scene, like in a very simple way. And then of course, if you want to go for something more fancy, then we're going to play with the HDRI maps. So let's just cancel this one. This render is just going to put in here. And I'm gonna hide those two lights, so I don't need it. Sometimes what I do, I just like combine everything into a single group. So select both lights with Control, click with Control, and then Control G. So you make a group. So I can just call it lights in here. So they're all there. So it's easy to hide everything at the same time. You know, just like Control H hides. And now let's add a HDRI map in here. But before I do that, let me just show you the ones I use. The best place in the past, man, you would have to spend a ton of money to buy maps. But nowadays you have access to a lot of stuff for free. And of course for free, but if you want to contribute and do some donations, you know, it's like those guys accept donations. They have a Patreon, and it's called HDRI Haven. And they have all kinds of stuff, like really amazing stuff. And my favorite stuff is the indoor stuff, right? So if you click under indoor, you're gonna see like a bunch of different ones here, and they have examples. I love this one here. This one here with anything with the window, a side window, to me, those are the best HDRIs. They produce like the more interesting, dramatic and natural reflections for eyes. And then there's another one here that's called, let's see, not the veranda, not this one, hotel room. There's another one. You have so many here, they're so good. This one here, it's called Chiara Interior. This is a very, very nice one. And if you click in any of those, they're gonna show you like what you can download. It's like basically like from 1K to 16K. So like all kinds of awesome resolutions, and it's free. You can just click it. And those are some of the examples of stuff rendered by it. So I have a bunch of those I'm gonna just import in here. So what I do normally, I have like a file, I'm gonna import, and I'm gonna import actually I'm gonna use the import with the option box. I'm gonna switch to best guess. Let's do my binary. And like I said before, I'm gonna turn off any namespaces. So that's the setup, like no namespaces checked, and then clashing nodes only, and then this string, and then empty. So I'm gonna import, and I'm gonna go back here where I saved, let's see, date, modify date. I have this HDRIs MB here. So if I import it, so I have this folder, and I have already a bunch of HDRI maps that I assigned to Arnold domes, right? So the way you create a dome, just let me hide this one. So I'm gonna assign one here from scratch for you to see. So under Arnold, you're gonna go to Lights, and you're gonna go to Sky Dome Light. So when you click on it, now you have the Sky Dome, and it's empty. So the first thing you're gonna do, you're gonna expand the attribute editor. Again, if it's not open for you, just press Ctrl+A, and it should open. So you have your attributes in there. And the first thing you're gonna go to, same thing we did with the area light. You're gonna turn off the normalize, and we're gonna increase the samples to 2. You can even go to 3, but they're gonna keep it simple at 2. You're gonna see there's a bunch of formats in here. It has this lat long, angular, mirrored ball. So that's the type of HDRI map you're gonna be using if you're familiar with it. If it's a mirrored ball, you're gonna switch. But all of those is kind of like a cylindrical kind of projection. So it's gonna be lat long. And then I'm gonna do just like the color. So I'm gonna click color, click the little box, and I'm gonna go to File. And the first thing I'm gonna do, I do this for all textures. I turn off any filtering, so I just keep everything super sharp. So turn off the filter, and I'm gonna go here in this little box to open the files. And I'm gonna navigate to where I have my HDRIs stored. Should be here, HDRI collection. I have separate in spherical, outdoors, and indoors. Under indoors, I have house, industrial, big rooms, and studio lighting. So I'm gonna click big rooms. And then I'm gonna go down here, and there is one that's called Nature Lab, this guy. And I'm gonna use this one that says HDR in reflection. This is the map I'm gonna be picking. So this map here, it's from this website that's the most well-known, I guess, the SIBL archive. So it's from hdrlabs.com, right? This one is the famous, depository in there. You can find all kinds of stuff, including HDRIs for your lights. So if you have an area light, you can assign a map to the area light. And to get like a realistic reflections, you can actually get like an umbrella light and things like that, But the Nature Lab, it's here somewhere. So here, so Nature Lab is right there, so you can download from it. So that's the map I'm using right now, and it's pretty cool. There's the fish right there. I love the reflection of this thing because it has this gigantic windows in there. And so let's just see how it renders straight away. Let's see what kind of result we get from that map. So here is not very dramatic. You see it's very flat, right? Because at this point we have to play with, with the angle. Let's see if we can get something more dramatic. So if I click the map and I just rotate this around, you're gonna start seeing a little bit more of it's a little bit more dramatic, as you get to the side. But of course, you're not gonna see a lot here because we don't have any reflections in our shader. So the shader, it's okay for rendering with the, like to look like clay, but it's not very okay here to see any reflections. So I'm just gonna tweak it just for us to see something. So under the shader here, properties, under specular, it's at 30% reflection, and the roughness is very high. So the lower you get, you go with this guy here, the more specky and shiny it's gonna get. So let's keep at 200. So you start seeing more reflection now. And then the index of refraction, I can even crank it. It gets even more reflection. And then this is one of the controls that you have, the specular one. The other one is actually the coat. The coat's pretty cool for, it's like if you want to create something that looks wet, so you can actually crank this and it creates this wetness. And the other control that's kind of new to Arnold is this sheen here. And this one is to simulate like velvet. So for example, like for skin, if you have peach fuzz, you don't need to use it. But if you have like a piece of cloth, it's like you can actually add a little bit of fake fuzz by using this one here. From time to time, it's like if you're not getting the shadows look correctly in Arnold sometimes, you have to reload the entire scene. So you can do like an update full scene here. And I noticed that, see, like now you have the shadows represented correctly. Before it was kind of like washed out. So it's because some of the lights I was working on, all those area lights, they kind of like got baked in there somewhere in the memory. So, but from now on, it should look correct. So always remember, like, if you're adding stuff to your scene or unhiding objects or changing drastically like lights and stuff, remember to just do like a update full scene, from time to time. Here in the controls for the render panel, you have all those different formats in here for the view. So you have like this log, which sometimes you get some interesting results, a little bit more washed out. You have this one, tone map, that's kind of cool too. You have the raw, which is very dark, and then the 2.2 gamma, which is kind of like the default. So 2.5 gamma, and then the RGB gamma is basically the same. Very, very little difference. Yeah, like very different. So sRGB. So now it's actually, doing the whole, render with the reflections and everything, so you can see it. Again, if I want to make sure that it looks a little bit more realistic, I can make those things more diffuse, right? Like the reflections more diffuse. So if you're just going to bring the coat down here, you can just turn it off altogether. And for the reflections, I'm going to increase again the specular roughness to something like 400. And now it's going to be less specky, a little bit more, and then I can make it like more, like a stronger spec, but more diffuse spec, right? And for how dramatic the light is, I mean, like sometimes you can cheat. So if you're not planning to use, for example, like the background in here, one thing you can do, you can click your HDRI, so click the background. So now it's selected in there. And here you have like individual controls for what you want to do. So you have the camera, transmission, diffuse, specular, SSS. So this is how the HDRI map is going to be affecting your object and your render. So if I go to the camera and just start reducing this, you're going to see like the background's going to start disappearing, right? All the way to completely black like that. So if you want to do this, for example, you can cheat a lot of stuff. Let's say like this map here has some interesting reflections, but it's kind of like the default position for the windows. It's a little bit too low, right? And let's say you want to get like more of like a higher kind of lighting. So you can actually rotate this whole thing here in a very unnatural way, like that, to artificially create like a top light, right? So you can cheat that. Or you can add the, it's like you can simply get like some area lights and start like adding area lights to create like fake windows everywhere. Especially those ones that you can get like apply a map to one of those area lights. And then you can basically like create a bunch of windows, fake windows, and mix them with HDRI. But let's say here it doesn't quite work because now it makes no sense what I have in the background. But let's say like if you use one of those HDRIs as the light source, and you can combine multiple ones, right? Like you can have multiple HDRIs. You can use one just for reflections, the other one just for the lighting, things like that. So yeah, so that's a fancy way to just like play with them. It's super simple. So what I did with that file I just imported with all the HDRI is that right now, if I just like, this is the one I just created. It just by default it names Sky Dome. So what I did the same stuff. I imported a different map for each one of those, and I created a bunch of Sky Domes, and I renamed them. So if I have the Nature Lab in there, but I also have like this one, Doc. Let's see how it looks like. So it looks like that. So it's kind of like a post office delivery thing, I think. So I normally keep a bunch of those like handy, because I can test like very quickly how the model is behaving under different lights. So I have the dock in here. I'm gonna hide it now, and then I'm gonna go to this realism here. This one is from what's his name? Is Maxim? I don't remember his name. I bought a package that's kind of like I don't remember, like $5 I think for a bunch of HDRI, and he made all of them. Some of them are apartments in Canada, actually, from his friends or something like that. And those maps are really nice. I can find the address and point to you guys. It's kind of like a Gumroad kind of thing, and you pay like $5 to $20, I think. And I got a bunch of them. So this is another one here, and then this this one I didn't test quite well just yet. Let me just crank the intensity of it. It's not showing a lot. Let's see. I don't even know if this one is working. It's at 3 right now. Let's put like 20. Is it too much? Yeah, this one is underexposed. You never know, you know. It's like if you buy an HDRI map or download from the same person, normally this person is gonna try to keep everything consistent. But then if it's like random stuff, sometimes it's kind of underexposed, and then you have to crank it, you know. And another thing I forgot to mention is that you try to match the resolution you're using. So if you're using a 4K map, you try to use the resolution here at 496, for example, right? And yeah, so this is just like a quick go through the to the process of just adding like a quick lighting environment using Arnold if you're not familiar with it. So it's like a, you know, a simple way to do it. This one's another one that's from HDRI Haven that's called, let's see the name of the file. It's a very interesting diffuse one. It's kind of like a greenhouse. It's kind of inside of the green. It's called Glass Passage. It's 4K. And it's very cool. It looks like this. It's like a glass passage. So it's very diffuse, you know, but it has some interesting quality to it. And of course, like there's one thing I cheat all the time. It's if I get a map, for example, the map is too yellow. For example, you get an exposure that looks kind of like, it's not quite daylight. It's a little bit, has a little contamination with incandescent light. So 3500 Kelvin, for example. Then what you can do, you can click the map and you can go to your color, right? Where you have the map plugged, and you're gonna scroll down here. And by default, you can see like every time you bring an HDRI, it comes in raw, and that's the format you want all your HDRIs to be. Don't put like a sRGB or anything, just keep raw at all times. If you go here, you have the color balance. So under color balance here, you have those slides, and you can tweak the color gain and the color offset, for example, to colorize this light. So by default, you see is slightly green, bluish right here. It's kind of green because I have the green material, but it's probably bluish light. So if I want to make it a little bit warmer, I can just put the color gain here, and I can make it a little bit more yellow or orange. By a little bit, I mean a little bit. I cranked all the way up there, but you know, it's like you can keep it like really low like that. Let's see. Yeah, so just add a little bit of more warmth to the light, you know. So you can actually tweak like the color temperature of the HDRI just by colorizing those maps. So you can use the color gain, the color offset to do that, you know. But yeah, that's about it for now. But I mean, like we still have very little time, but we still have a little time for some questions if you guys have anything. Thanks for letting me talk today because I could explain more things. Yeah, I could explain a lot of stuff today.
Hey, Kris, I had a question, especially about the set names of the SSS. I've been testing in the last Arnold version, and I feel like I can see the difference. I don't know if you have any test or something like that with the last Arnold version.
Oh yeah. Like all my new renders, they're using the new random walk 2, and I know first thing I noticed is that the colors, everything is super saturated. So I had to desaturate my maps to get similar results from the original random walk. That was the first thing I noticed.
Okay.
But in terms of result, I mean, like when you get to, for example, like if you look at my Instagram, like the teeth and gums and stuff, it works very well for that kind of stuff, you know. And for the skin too, I'm actually very happy with the results so far.
Okay, and the other one is I've seen that you made like a light rig with realistic soft boxes and that kind of stuff. I don't remember if you did it with the midget girl, I think.
Yes. So what he's talking about, I was trying to recreate like an actual lighting setup, similar to what you have like a studio lighting. Basically, like I create, instead of like soft boxes, which are normally square, I create like those octa boxes. Normally, like in the studios, they use those gigantic ones. And then you can use a grid. normally the grid actually, it directs the light rays, right? Instead of like spreading things out, it basically like the grid keeps everything going, you know, in a certain direction. It's very interesting because you can actually tweak the thickness of the grid. And then if it's thick, then you get very directional. If the shallower it gets, the more it starts spreading out. It's a very interesting effect. It's like a very subtle in comparison to the regular softbox, like a area light. But the final result is interesting because you get that interesting reflection of the softbox with the grid that looks very realistic. You know, when you get like those pictures of super close up of eyes, you can find online. Like if you Google like close up macro photography of eyes, it's amazing. And then you can see the reflection is always like a grid. It's like a octabox with a grid or something like that. And it's always in there in every single one of them. And it's for a reason. It redirects everything and reveals the forms a little better, you know.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, man. And thanks for the class. It was intense.
Awesome. Yeah. No, it's gonna get more intense, man. I don't want to bore you guys, so I'm gonna be pushing things.
No, not bore. Not
awesome.
bore.
All right, guys, we are at 11:30. I think I have time for one more question, and then we wrap up.
I have one observation. You're talking about mega pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I found this website. I put it on the chat. It's called Gigapan.
Yeah. Gigapan, right?
Yeah, it's kind of disgusting because there are old people there, and I put the link on the chat if you want.
It's yeah, Gigapan. So this one is it's like Giga. Is this one here? Is this the? Oh, sorry, I cannot hear you.
Oh, sorry. I put the link on the chat with
a
picture of an old guy, you know?
Okay, awesome.
It's very nice.
Yeah. Gigapan profiles. Okay, click it. Yeah, this thing, like I looked at before, you can go zoom in forever, right? Like you can go really, really close. And you can get a ton of
take a look at his nose. It's disgusting.
Oh, there's a problem with the map in there, huh? It's kind of like something in the attachment in there. Oh, yeah, that's pretty awesome. Oh, look at that mole, dude. That's a nightmare.
Yeah. But I think it's a good reference.
No, it's amazing. Yeah, this website is really good. Yep. I have to actually use it more, but well, thanks for the tip. And guys, if you're working on your stuff, don't stop. Tomorrow we have one more for this week, and we wrap up this week. And my plan is to actually send like maybe a little small poll or something like that, or a little questions and like a quick doing a little research about how the whole thing is going, so I can improve for the next week instead of like having the whole class run for 4 weeks and then just at the end ask for feedback. So my intention is to actually ask for some quick feedback after this first week. So if there's something we can address for the next week, you know, it's like I can try to improve during the course of it instead of like you guys improving for the next group. I want you guys to improve for yourselves. So yeah, let's do that. And then, yeah, I hope you guys are having fun. I'm having a ton of fun. So thanks, guys.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
was a
thanks,
great
man.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody. So,
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.